Hey folks, welcome back to another edition of My Car Guru. Oops, I got gum in my mouth. Hold please. Okay, I'm back, gum-free. I just love those ice cubes. I think they're called ice cubes. They come in a little, like miniature bucket, and they're all square, and they just hold their flavor well. It reminds me of my mom's favorite gum, Beech Nut. I think it was Double Mint or Spearmint or both. I liked Juicy Fruit when I was growing up. Plus, every time I got my hair cut, my barber in Nitro, West Virginia, Mr. Payne, would give me Bazooka bubblegum. And really, I enjoyed the little comic strip that was inside of the Bazooka bubblegum. So that's more of my life history that you care zero about, but we're going to talk about cars and things that are going on in the car industry. But first, you know, sometimes you need to listen to that little inner voice in your mind when it's encouraging you to do something good for somebody else. You know, I often think of excuses. You know, I'm late. I need to get over and look at that car. I need to talk to that employee. No, I don't need to go do that. I don't need to go visit that man and his son. But today, it was weird. I was walking through my field. I was going to get my tractor. Had to walk to the barn. It's about, 400 yards away, 500 yards away probably. Sliding the door open, there's my tractor. A freshly dug groundhog hole right behind it. I mean, that groundhog had to work it the hard way. They had to dig through about 5 inches of gravel and dig a hole. And I understand wanting to have a cover over his head. I totally get that. But it's just weird. So I jumped on my tractor. Before I went to the house, I mowed a fabulous walking trail for me and my wife. So that got that done. But before I got to the tractor, I had this thought in my mind. I said, okay, who can I bless today? Lord, I said a little prayer. And it's funny, when I got into my vehicle, going out the driveway, I decided, I'm not going to go to the dealership. I'm going to go over to G2. That's the other end of town where I do restorations and where we have Green Outdoor, our outdoor store. And I went around Tuscum College, a way I normally don't go, which led me past the house of this guy that I hinted at just a minute ago and his son. Now, this guy is probably 88 years old. His son is Down syndrome and is probably approaching 50 now. And I said, okay, I'm just going to turn in. So I saw his car parked. I turned in, went in, and I'm so glad I did. Because I found circumstances that are not good, and family members need to get involved. Unfortunately, locally, there are no family members. They all live out of town. So I asked him, where's your phone book? Do you have these phone numbers for your brother-in-law and so forth? And so I ended up calling them and talking to found out who his attorney was and talked to them. And I was talking to his brother-in-law, and I said, I hope you don't feel that I'm sticking my nose into something that doesn't need to be there. And he said, no, Lenny, I greatly appreciate you doing this, because we're far away. We're elderly as well, and he just doesn't have anybody locally. So, that small voice that hit me in the middle of that field on the way to my barn led to, I think, doing some good things for somebody who really needed me. I went over to see their attorney. Actually, instead of just calling him, he won't ever answer the phone. I know him well. And so I just went to his office, walked in the front door, and there's his wife, who is also his secretary. And I said, I've been over at such and such house. He said, I was thinking about him yesterday, because they did a lot of paperwork and wills and stuff like that. And I was thinking about him the other day, and I was just hoping and praying that somebody was checking in on them. Do you see how everything comes full circle? Sometimes when the Lord's involved, it was just something that, you just wouldn't think would happen unless you believe that things like that happen. So I'm going to take my first break, and then I'll be back in just 1 minute. I may, just may, have mentioned this the other day, that I'm going to go speak to the group of, I guess, sophomores, juniors, and seniors at the tech school here in Greenville and Greene County. I'm doing that tomorrow. And, when you're trying to think of something to say to a group of young people, the first thing you have to think about is, how do you get their attention? How do you get them to look past my age, my gray hair, and the fact that I dress weird and don't have any tattoos? How do you get past that so that they actually listen to you? Well, one of the things I've found is that a lot of young people are kind of impressed if you are a car dealer because they love cars. That's about the only reason. But the best way to get through anybody, I guess, is to tell a story that they can relate to, or tell them a situation that they can relate to. And basically, I have come up with 3 phrases words or phrases that I really want to talk to them about, because I think it will make a big difference in their work life, family lives, all this stuff that's coming down the pike at them. I was a young high school graduate at 17. I didn't turn 18 until November 17th of my freshman year in college. But, I already knew how to write a check. I knew how to balance a checkbook. My parents had taught me some basic fundamental things about, throughout my whole life, how to be polite and respectful to adults, how to look people in the eye, when you're talking to them, how to shake somebody's hand, how to engage in conversation, and how important that was. How to open doors for ladies and all the different things. I mean, my parents were pretty tight about that kind of stuff, and it was important for them, for us not to be just, book smart, which I wasn't that great. I was a solid B student. My brother was the A student. But how to be socially and emotionally mature, so that, even at the age of 17, I could walk into a businessman's office or a doctor's office, and when they were done interacting with me, they felt like I was a pretty well-rounded young man. That was important for my parents to be able to develop their sons that way. Well, I'm just not seeing that, folks. I'm not seeing it. When I interview people here at the dealership, it is just so disappointing. When you have an employee that's been working for you 2 weeks and everything looks so promising, and then they just don't show up for work one day. They don't call. They don't write a nice letter. They don't do anything. They just disappear. Well, what happened to Billy? Oh, he went to work at someplace else, some other shop down the road. It's just like they don't have any clue how to relate to other human beings and what their responsibilities are as an employee, or as just somebody who's responsible. So I came up with these 3 words or phrases that I'm going to talk about. The first one is judgmentalism. I know it's a big word. Being judgmental, and how judgment is going to be a fact of their life. The Bible says to judge not, lest ye be judged. But that's a human thing, right? To judge circumstances, to judge situations, to judge people. I have to, you can call it judging or you can call it evaluating, but, we have to look at the performance of our employees. We have to, judge relationships. There's so many times that we are judged, and you have to be willing to accept that and to accept the criticism and stuff that can come from that type of situation. I mean, when I was growing up, I craved judgment. I mean, I used it as a scorecard. How was I doing? I mean, there was no other measuring stick for me. If somebody wasn't looking at me and saying, you need to do this better, or you're doing great here, or so forth. And so many young people, they just can't handle it. They can't handle criticism of any kind. And I think young people have to be prepared for that, going out into the world and understand how other people are going to look at them and, yes, judge them based on how they are, their disposition, their communication abilities, and their performance. So get ready. It's coming. And you have to be able to learn how to handle that and to accept it as a positive experience, even when it feels like a negative one. The other thing that I wanted to talk to him about the other word is adaptability. Being able to adapt to whatever your circumstances are and to not let them overwhelm you. Sometimes when you can't adapt to a situation, let's say it's a bad situation at work. You've got a mean, hateful boss, and they've created a terrible work environment. That may not be something that's worthy of your adaptation. And it's okay to leave that situation, but you have to do it in the right way. Maybe that business needs to learn something from you as to how they treat people. It's just like if you get bad service at a car dealership or at a restaurant or wherever, is the best thing for you to do just to leave? Or is it better to go back in there and give them positive feedback, judge them, tell them what they need, what you think they need to learn from that experience so that they can get better? Some businesses are going to say, you just need to leave. Or others will say, well, thank you very much for taking the time to complain rather than just leaving. I really do appreciate it, and I hope you'll come back. That's how we get better, right? By figuring out what other people think about what we do and then finding a way to adapt or move on, which may be the case. I told my parents as a senior, I already knew I was going to marry this girl that I'm still stuck with. And just kidding. And I knew I was going to get married, but also knew that, I wanted to go to San Francisco. I wanted an adventure honeymoon. And that included flying to San Francisco, where I wouldn't want to go now, but back then it was a really cool place. So I wanted to fly to San Francisco, stay there for a few days, rent a car, drive all the way down the Coast Highway, go to Monterey, and travel all the way down Highway 1 to Los Angeles, and then stay there. And maybe while I was down there, visit my cousins that lived in Costa Mesa. I knew this is what I wanted to do, but it was going to be expensive. And my dad said, well, how are you going to pay for it? Because I knew they had their hands full paying for the wedding and well, not the whole wedding, but, just parts of it as the grooms. Well, all of that's changed now these days, but still, it was an expensive proposition. And so I said, well, I guess I'm going to have to get a job. And I was at University of Tennessee, so I had a guy in my class that his dad owned a feed store, a Purina feed store. And he said, well, we're looking for people to work. If you want to work, after in the afternoons and then on Saturdays, then you can come work for us. Well, I did. I realized that my future would not include unloading boxcars of 100-pound bags of Bull Developer. That stuff was made with molasses, and I could feel every ounce of it. And I had to stack those bags 8 high. Now, the 50-pound bags, I had to stack them. Now, that was Purina dog food and pig food and you name it. I had to stack those 15 high. And plus, when it was dog dipping day, they always had a dog dipping day, I was the dog dipper. And that means I got as much of that stuff on. We had this big vat, and I had to pick up these big German Shepherds and chows. I tell you what, you pick up a chow, pretty heavy dog. When it's soaked in dog dipping fluid, it's really heavy dog. And I'm soaked with that stuff. But anyway, I was the dog dipper. My point is, I realized real quickly, I'm glad I don't work in a warehouse unloading box cars and tractor trailers and stuff like that. But I knew I had to do it. I had to adapt in order to pay for my dream honeymoon. And that's what these kids have to know and understand. I think that's important. And then the final thing is be a blessing. Wake up in the morning when you can. Sometimes you don't always feel this way, but when you can, when you feel like it, or even sometimes when you don't feel like it, how can I be a blessing to somebody today? Because I love Zig Ziglar. I mean, he's just wonderful. And he had this saying, I get what I want by helping enough other people get what they want first. And when you put other people first, it's amazing how well, you're blessing them, but you're also blessed too. And you will never have a hard time finding friends, finding mentors, finding people to talk to share with, when you put them first. You know, when you're selling cars and the first thing you're doing is talking about money, most customers can see right through that. And they want to first get to know you a little bit. They're evaluating you, and they want you to help them find a car. They may not come out and say it, but it's amazing how a good salesperson can make life a whole lot easier for a customer simply by listening and putting their needs first. But you know, this doesn't just apply to selling something or doing business with people. It's just interacting with other human beings, right? I mean, it's when you go into a restaurant and there's other people coming in the door and you step aside and hold the door for them to come in. It's little things like that that just shines a little light into other people's lives. And, you know, they may, as they walk on into the restaurant, say, boy, that was nice. You don't see that very often. Or you just let that person over that's trying to merge into your lane. They're not trying to race you to get ahead of you. They're just trying to get on the road. And I'm sure they appreciate it if you back off, flash your lights, and let them go. And I don't think that means that you have to hand out money, you know, to every homeless person that beats on your door or offers to clean your windshield or holds the sign up. You know, my wife and I talk about that sometimes. It's, when do you know when to act, when to hand out money? And we heard a little seminar one time. I don't remember where it was on YouTube or what it was, but they said, you know, don't give them money if you want to do something neat for them, hopefully something they need. Just put together a little baggie package. Go to the store and put some food and some maybe toothbrushes and who knows, soap, deodorant, whatever, and put it in a series of bags. And anytime you see somebody, roll down your window and hand them one of those bags. Some of them will say, well, this is insulting. I wanted money. But others will really appreciate it. And to me, that's being a blessing to somebody, whether it's received in that same spirit or not. So anyway, they're probably expecting me to come in and speak to them about, you know, how much horsepower the new Nissan Z has. And I'm sure that would be interesting to some of them, but I want to give them something they can use, and hopefully they'll listen. But, you know, you can't control that. You can't control whether somebody considers what you do a blessing or informative or educational. I mean, they have to be willing to receive it that way. I mean, I've gone to speak to groups, and, you know, especially when they're in their classroom, especially when it's middle school, and they bring all different groups in. And I had this one girl one time, as soon as she sat down, she put her head on the desk and never looked up. And obviously she's not taking it in. Well, maybe she is. Maybe she's listening. Maybe that was her form of rebellion, or maybe she was just tired. You don't really know what's going on in her home, or maybe she didn't get any sleep last night for one reason or another. Now that's where judgmentalism can be a problem, not for her, but for me. Maybe because of the way they look or the way they act, or, you know, how they sound, you know, what their tone of voice is. You just don't know. So there are really two sides to that judgmental coin, aren't there? You know, certain aspects of it are necessary, essential if you're going to grow, and other aspects of it can be very bad. And I hope I can get that point across. Okay, I'll be back in just 1 minute. Okay, while we're here, we might as well talk about cars, right? Well, let me just give you a little update on the tariffs and the impact on prices. Most of the manufacturers are looking at production in May will start being more expensive. So, you know, if the cars are produced in May, then they'll probably start coming in July. So you can anticipate prices being higher in July as the inventories start to dwindle down. Like right now, we have plenty of vehicles. We've got a lot of stuff already in the pipeline. Yes, we do have some stuff coming from Mexico, but it is already in the United States and did not suffer the tariff. So there is an advantage to people who are in the market for a car anyway, or will be maybe in the next 6 months to accelerating it a little bit and doing something now. So you just have to really evaluate what your situation is and whether it makes sense. You know, if you have a really high payoff on your vehicle and you don't see yourself trading in, the next year or two, then I wouldn't pull ahead and do it now, because you're just going to be financing your negative equity, and that just doesn't make sense. If you like the car where you are, there's no reason to pull ahead and buy something now just because of the tariffs, because they may not be in effect in a year or two. It all depends on what the impact is on the overall economy. Now, companies like the Ford Motor Company, they are offering employee pricing. I think Stellantis is also offering employee pricing. That is a really good offer. One of the great things about employee pricing is you don't have to worry about negotiation on everything. I talk about the 4 points, the 4 targets that you have to hit in order to get a great deal. And one of those targets is the initial sale price of the vehicle that you're buying. Well, you don't have to worry about that when it's employee pricing. You honestly do not. That is fixed, and that is a great deal, as long as you're dealing with an above-board dealer. And most of them are. There's a few bandits, as we know. The only thing you really have to negotiate is the trade value. And the best way to do that is to send me your VIN number, give me your mileage and the trim package that you have on your vehicle, and I'll tell you what it's worth, what you can expect to get. I don't care if you're buying where you live. I can help you with your trade value to make sure that you don't get taken advantage of on that. Because sometimes when dealers sell vehicles under the employee purchase program, they don't make as much money as they normally would, so they try to hold back on somebody's trade. Meaning, if your vehicle is really worth $22,000, they only give you $20,000 or offer you $20,000 for it, and that makes them an extra $2,000 in profit. So it's this kind of stuff that you can learn by listening to My Car Guru, along with other stuff. Well, thanks for listening. Call me, 423-552-2020, or send me a text. Or you can send me an email to LennyLawson2020@gmail.com. And I'll see you on the next edition of My Car Guru.